So, back last year, this book came out across all good bookstores right across the Western world at least, and it's probably been the most podcast book of anything. Jonathan Haidt was the flavour of not just the month, but for right up until now, his book's been a #1 bestseller when he wrote the book called The Anxious Generation. He's not the first person writing about this, but his book indeed attracted the attention, and he's probably, talk about shortly, one of the reasons why Australia's new laws are about to come in around social media and age for our children. So the book sparked a movement and made Haidt a household name for families concerned about tech. The book has sold more than 1.7 million copies, has been mentioned by name in school technology policies. The book influenced a social media ban for teens under 16 here in Australia, kicking in next month. After the wife of a lawmaker read it, and then she told her husband, "You need to read this and take action." And he happened to be the Premier of South Australia. And so there is the South Australian Peter Malinauskas, how do you say that? Malinauskas, and his wife Annabelle West. Annabelle West is the person responsible for the media bans about to happen in Australia. And we're actually the first country in the world that are making this happen. Denmark has just passed last week that they're going to make this happen. America has said it's probably too hard, but they're going to try. And Jonathan Haidt's got a movement there now. If you go to anxiousgeneration.com, you'll see that movement that's occurring right now. So Haidt says, my central claim in the book is that these two trends, he says, overprotection in the real world and underprotection in the virtual world, these are the major reasons why children born after 1995 have become known, in his opinion, as the anxious generation. He says there were 3 great acts that led to this, that occurred, and I can remember this because I grew up in the 1960s, so as I look back, I can remember all these things happening. Some of you might too. Act 1, he says, was the loss of community and the loss of trust. This happened with the invention of the colour TV and the invention of air conditioning, both great inventions. And what he says was that back in, before then, all the families would gather outside on the front veranda. You'll know your neighbours, you talk to your neighbours by name. Your kids played in their yard, they played in your yard, or you played cricket on the front street. Anybody here remember cricket on the road? Yeah, some of you do. And you would yell out car, and someone would grab the stumps, and someone would grab the bat, and you all run off, and the car goes past, and then get out there and off you go again. But he says, then we invented colour TV and some really great programs. These date me. Everybody remembers A Country Practice. There's heads nodding. Oh, I must be about similar age. Or The Flying Doctors, and 2 great programs where you'll watch them, you'll gather around the TV as a family to watch, and ad break come on, you'll race to the bathroom or race to get a snack. Someone yell, it's on again. You would all race back to watch when Molly died. That was a really, really bad moment on TV, but a most watched moment when Molly died on Country Practice. But everyone was watching, everyone talked about the same shows at work because you're all watching the same shows. So you had those conversations around the drinking fountain or with your neighbours about what you're watching under your air conditioning around the TV. But trust began to get lost in your neighbours, and you began to move off the streets and into your own home and into your own yard. Act 2 was the loss of unsupervised outdoor play-based childhood in the 1990s. Because we had TV now, maybe a child abduction occurred somewhere, and we had this idea of a white van and a man in a yellow raincoat that came and took our kids, and we better be careful because our kids might get abducted.
Well, the interesting thing is the stats say there's actually less child abductions now than there was 30, 40 or 50 years ago.
Yeah, It's actually decreased.
It's decreased. Our kids are actually safer.
We're actually safer. But actually we began to get worried about our kids and the idea that kids need to be supervised at all time. You try letting your kid wander on the street now and you'll probably get a call from the police or human services about these kids are wandering and not being supervised. So
part of it also too was because of financial pressures, and it doesn't matter which parent was home, but we ended up with families with both parents needing to work to pay the mortgage.
Yeah, and also the shrinking backyard has occurred at the same time.
Yep.
So often our kids are safer indoors where we can supervise them and know them. But Jonathan Haidt calls this a second tragic act of the three-act tragedy. Act 3.
I know our kids are 29 and 25 now, but I was considered to be the really bad mother at the primary school gate because...
You allowed them to walk home.
Yeah, I did. Our kids had to walk home. Madison was at the end of kindy. They had a 1 kilometre walk down a path. It was fenced from the road. They did not have to cross a road to get home. Well, the grief I got from parents, and I said, they start off, there's about 15 of them. Most of them go round the corner together, and we're the third house.
Yeah.
We were the third house round the corner. I said, there's virtually nothing that's going to happen to them because there is an arena of safety. There's more than one of them. Big brother is able to supervise the little one. They're getting the illusion of independence. The chances were I actually drove past them while they were halfway down the road, but it was teaching them to be self-reliant, to be able to get from A to B. Then we moved, and I think it was about 1.5 kilometres with 2 road crosses, one of which was supervised and the other one was... And, nothing happened. They whinged about it, but, gee, they learned how to get themselves from one spot to the other safely.
An illusion of independence.
Illusion of independence, but it gave them that that sense of achievement which little kids need to have.
Yes, that brings us to Act 3, which happened in the 1990s onwards with the invention of the internet. Now, we can all remember that. Who remembers the Commodore 64 kilobyte? Again, I'm dating myself. It was the best computer you could ever get. I said we'd reached a brand new age when we could all have 64 kilobyte computers that actually memorised our essay, allowed you to correct it online and submit it online, and all of that was actually just happening in the 1990s onwards, but particularly the years 2010 to 2015 with the rise of what Jonathan Haidt calls the phone-based, screen-based childhood. In 2010, we actually got the smartphone and we got forward-facing cameras. The selfie is invented as a word where you can actually take selfies, and we bought one for ourselves and we updated our models and gave our second or third, once we get our model, we give the one that's out of date by 2 or 3 years to our children, and suddenly everyone has a portal in their pocket for better or for worse. And I need to say right now, don't get us wrong, we're not saying ban technology.
We love tech.
I love my tech.
We love tech. We're an Apple family. We'll just be upfront about this right now.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with tech.
It's just how you use it.
But the big keys takeaway today is variety and balance and moderation, and what that looks like for you when it comes to balancing technology in the world we find ourselves in today. Haidt says the confluence of these 3 acts or stories in 3 acts, especially the years 2010, 2015, is what he calls the great rewiring of childhood. He says few of us understood what was happening in children's virtual worlds, and we lacked the knowledge to protect them from tech companies that had designed their products to be addictive. So that's the world that many of our kids are growing up in. And this is why we've ended up overprotecting our kids in the real world while underprotecting them in the virtual world. I mean, if my phone has issues with it, you ask a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old and they can just seem to know naturally how to fix it. And for the first time, it seems our kids know more about tech than what we do, and are able to sort it out pretty quickly because it's a natural for them. They're digital natives, and know how to do it. So in 2024, kids spent, on average in Australia, 5 hours a day on social media. Most of that time is on TikTok and short videos. 35 hours a week on the internet. Add in video games, and our kids are spending 7 to 10 hours a day on average in Australia
And
on their
this
phone.
is not including necessary time to complete homework.
Homework or time on screens at school. This is outside of that. So, and I've seen it. If you go to any supermarket near especially near a public school, I haven't really tested the private schools, but I imagine it's similar. But
For some reason, they seem to build a Coles or a Woolworths opposite the local public school.
and they put
Don't know why.
products called Mother and Rockstar and Red Bull right near the front. So, and I've seen the kids walking in and walking out with a 4-pack. One for breakfast, one for recess, one for lunch and one for afternoon to get them through the day, because especially our boys have been up all night playing the best in the world on gaming. And this is a vicious cycle that many of them are putting themselves through. They don't expect them to concentrate at school and get the results at school and listen to the teacher.
So what's happened? They haven't slept, so they're sleep deprived. The brain's not firing quite the way it should. They then are drinking Mother or a high energy drink or high caffeine products. Then when we at school go to confiscate the energy drink, because usually it's banned and signed off on by the P&C, but signed off on by the P&C, we're allowed to confiscate it. The students are then not functioning properly and they are making irrational choices. What happens is the teacher says, "Oi, come on, hand it over. You know you're not meant to have it. What are you doing about it?" So they then arc up and lose their temper, get cranky, call the teacher names, and then end up with a suspension. So that's the really bad cycle that we're getting because of lack of sleep, because they're on their games. The other thing is they might come in, they're not aggressive, they haven't had any energy drinks or caffeine, and so heads go on the desk and they'll sleep in school time, and so they're not learning. By the way you're going, they're missing out on their basic skills because of what's happening.
Yeah. Smartphone Nation by Dr. Caitlin Riga, she's talking about the UK audience, but she says 75% of girls, this is true for Australia too, you look at Collective Shout, they have these same stats, 75% of girls have experienced digital flashing, sending of unsolicited nudes by the age of 15. That's just a general stat.
And often from a male in their class.
That's it. And now the deep fake porn, where they're actually creating porn of the girls in their class, is another issue that's just taking off with AI right now and is causing a lot of distress, especially in many of our schools right here in Australia. 62% of 11 to 13-year-olds are exposed to porn unintentionally. The average age of exposure now is 7. It's often on their phone, it's often on a friend's phone where they come across it unintentionally, and our kids get exposed to it at an increasingly younger age.
Part of it is, like, I don't cop it now that I'm older. I've had stuff before that's, you know how Facebook and social media just suggest things to you and you're scrolling through and it's like, oh, no, let's report that. They know, of course, the ages and the statistics our kids are putting in. So these companies are then setting the parameters so that this particular age group is actually targeted with
Go down the rabbit hole.
So at my age, which is 54 turning 55, I'm not targeted. I'm out of their age range, but they're targeting our teenage kids directly.
On my phone, you see a lot of chook pictures. I get targeted by people breeding chickens and things. Richmond Football Club, gardening, I'm seeing all those sorts of things. But you try logging in as a 13, 14, 15-year-old girl or boy, and very quickly they take them down a rabbit hole, and they get things thrown at them which would make your hair curl. And often it's so bad that they don't want to talk to their parents about it. It's designed to take them away from their parents. So there's 4 foundational harms that hate claims have come about. We talked about sleep deprivation, social deprivation, the loss of face-to-face communication, play and connection, and connection to nature. Now, thankfully, we as a church have pathfinders, and we saw that today on display here in Adventurers. I call that the Adventist advantage, that having our kids involved in pathfinders gets them off screen generally. You go to Stewart's Point where we were and there was not much reception. It's just bad for it. And generally when you take your kids out camping, it's not crash hot for phone reception, which is good, because they're off screens for a weekend, they're connecting with their friends, they're connecting with nature and connecting with God. It's a powerful combination that researchers are now saying that's what we need. So thank you, Moses, and the youth department, and our Pathfinder leaders, and our new leaders just been elected, all of those people, because it is powerful for our kids.
So I'm going to pop it in here because you're not doing some of the other ones we'd normally talk about. Our kids, for a whole variety of reasons, ended up going through the state school, Bonnells Bay Primary and then Morisset High. Andrew, and we're allowed to say this, the kids have told us we can, Andrew has ADHD and has autism. And 20 odd years ago, the public system had funding which supported him as really well. He's a bit of an outlier because although he has autism and ADHD, he's actually really, really bright. We have lots of kids like that, but 20-something years ago, it was not really talked about or diagnosed. So he ended up there because we had funding for an SLSO or Student Learning Support Officer to support him in his learning and even more importantly in his social skills, because that was what was really needed. And of course, then they're not exposed to what other kids get in a church system. Daron and I were, or church school system, we were really good at home, but Pathfinders...
And I taught scripture at school.
Daron taught scripture at school, but Pathfinders and Adventurers was the one thing we insisted on. The kids got told, both of them, you're doing Master Guide, don't even argue about it. That gave them all of these things Daron is talking about. It also gave them much closer friends from like church, but it also gave them the ability, it proved to them that they could stick to something and they could achieve something that was hard and took time. And that's really important. And so if you've got kids who are going through school and they might be applying for scholarships, having you completed Pathfinders and having your Master Guide to say, hey, I achieved this over X amount of years and it's the highest award, it's really good at helping your kids
for
get
resilience, which is the topic you chose.
But it's also resilience as well.
Yep. And for those on the spectrum, we do another topic on neurodivergence. And
that self-satisfaction of like, I have achieved something, I've worked hard, nothing can be any better for that than your your sense of self-worth. Definitely something you really need to, if you can get your kids to finish.
Yep. We've talked about sleep deprivation already, decline both in quality and quantity since the invention of the smartphone, not just for our kids, but for all of us.
Okay, so we now know, and it's fairly new research, I've been reading about it, you have overnight, apparently our brains washes itself, and it gets rid of all kinds of toxins and inflammatory factors that build up in our brain. So that's why our kids actually need to sleep. Your kids, even when they're little, are not too little to be, like, we talk to our kids about this type of stuff. Hey, we were reading and we've been doing some research, and did you know if we do this, this and this, it's going to help our brain keep itself healthy. And that's why we go to sleep. Start talking about things like this with your kids from the time they're really little, because then it's the drip thing. You talk about it and it goes in and it becomes embedded and a part of who they actually are.
And the research is saying now that one way to help our kids learn how to balance technology is having those conversations often and early around balance, variety, moderation, the family rules, what they look like, and what the rules are in our family. Having those conversations regularly is really important, and teaching our kids to self-regulate is important as well. So they're more likely to get off their phones if they are able to be given the choice, and they've made that choice and they've made that decision with you rather than making the decision for them.
So we always took the point of view of, well, we're Adventists or we're Christians, and this is why we don't. And in addition to that, this is the latest science, the research, and this tells us that if we're doing this particular thing, so if we're drinking, it's actually damaging our brain or it's setting us up to develop cancer later on in life. So we took it from both a Christian point of view, was our belief view, but we also backed it up with science. And And we would talk backwards and forwards and we would give real life situations and scenarios. It was like those three things together actually had the impact. You couldn't just say, the Bible says it's a bad idea. Well, the Bible says it's a bad idea, but why is it really a bad idea? Well, the science says. And then we avoid it because these are the social impacts, and we found that to be really effective.
It worked, especially with our kids who are on the spectrum. It seemed to really work. Number 3 is attention fragmentation. The ability, he says, to stay on one mental road while many off-ramps threaten. Your child might be on their computer in their room saying, Dad or Mum, I'm doing homework. You're laughing as a teacher. They're online for 6, 7, 8 hours at night doing homework. You can talk to any teacher and they'll say 1 to 2 hours at the most. You can guarantee if they're online for 5, 6, 7 hours, you can go through their screens and they're good at hiding things behind apps and things. They'll be playing a game. They'll have photos, open another one. They'll have a conversation, open another one. They'll be searching the internet on another one.
They're probably having like 6 conversations at the same time.
Yeah. And if you come into the room, they're really good at flicking to homework screen. And little Johnny is doing their homework and boy, he's so dedicated. No. Don't let them. Talk to your teacher, they'll tell you. Number 1, they'll say if they can't get it done in 1 to 2 hours of a night, and most of it's not on screen, it's off screen anyway. So Kindy 1, 2, you'll probably have a book to read that'll take about 10 minutes. Yeah.
And you might have 1 or 2 worksheets. From year 7 upwards, the recommendation is half an hour per night, per probably 5 days a week, half an hour per night per year at school. So year 7, about half an hour of homework, unless they've got an assignment, that's a bit different. And that's for revision, catching up, reading through what you've done. That's really important, the reading through and revising it. So I teach kids and they leave their books in the classroom. They're not revising. That's pointless. And so by the time they get through to year 12, you're probably looking at about 3 hours a night, Monday to Thursday, and then 6 hours on a Sunday.
The kids are good at developing their own language. They'll communicate with a few symbols, parent in the room. So everyone, friends know, don't annoy them, the parent's in the room. Or parent looking over shoulder. They can actually communicate to say, parent's looking over shoulder, I'm not available right now while the parent's in the room. Then when the parent leaves, they can go back to what they were doing and their attention is divided. What the teachers are saying, and you can back this up, is that in class, kids are having trouble focusing on anything for a long period of time anymore because their attention, their brain is so used to dopamine hits and I'll talk about this shortly, from the gaming and from the social media, that classes sometimes are just actually boring because it's not giving them the excitement that they get from a screen.
Yeah, so kids are finding it hard to do what I call the hardjacker. And the hardjacker is where you write something and you come back and you then have to edit it. So you are constantly going into your working memory and into your stored memory as well to go, where do I have to put a capitals? You know, I need to put an apostrophe here. They aren't doing that because it takes too much focus. And
it's boring.
It's boring. It takes too long. We can't see what the point of it is. And then they get to year 11 and year 12 and all of a sudden they're not getting the marks that they are capable of academically because they haven't put in the hardjacker to learn
the building blocks.
The building blocks. I suppose that's the best word for it. Really big issue. And as a learning and support teacher, I'm actually working with kids to put those building blocks into place in
high school
where it should already be there.
So a lot of your time is actually teaching kids in high school how to spell properly because they don't know how to spell properly and things like that. So yeah. So there's 4 foundational harms. Number 4, he said, is addiction. The use of advanced behaviour techniques to hook children into becoming heavy users of their products. And they design them to keep our kids online for longer. Dr. Anna Lemke says, we are living in a time of unprecedented access, she says, to high reward, high dopamine stimuli. Drugs, food, news, gambling, shopping, gaming, texting, sexting, Facebooking, Instagramming, YouTubing, tweeting. She says This has already hit me when she said it. Next slide, Lisa. She says the increased numbers, variety and potency are staggering. The smartphone, now she says it, not me, is the modern day hypodermic needle delivering digital dopamine 24/7 for a wired generation. Next slide. So the real question then, according to, that's Jo Orlando, she wrote this book recently, which is a really good book worth getting. She says, is not whether technology changes the brain, because it does. But the real question is how those changes happen and whether they are good or bad for your child. That's where parenting in the digital age comes in. So let's take a brief trip into the teen brain. I'm going to do this fairly quickly. The brain begins to develop in utero during the 3rd week of gestation and is complete by the age of 25. That's huge implications for parenting. You notice that they don't give insurance, good driving insurance to your kids until they turn 25, because they know they're more likely to write a car off or have an accident or do something silly until they reach the age of 25, when the brain is fully developed as an adult brain. So that's something to remember, that our job as a parenting is never done.
You know, I think our kids were pretty smart. One got their licence just before they turned 22 and the other one got it when they were just under 23.
I was quite relieved and pleased about that.
Yeah, perfect. Like, could drive a car correctly. Could they tell whether there was a car coming or not? Nope. So, you know, fortunately they made that decision themselves. Really good decision.
Dr. Jo Orlando, who's an Australian, says from the moment your baby is born, their brain is in full-on growth mode, forming new connections while at the same time trimming down the ones they do not use. This process is called neuroplasticity. It's how your kids learn to talk, walk, solve problems and interact with the world, and for better or for worse, that's what's occurring. So think of like gardening, new pathways grow like fresh branches and unused ones get pruned away to make room for stronger, healthier connections. Over time, this helps your child or teen's brain work more efficiently. So that's the way the brain's set up, to trim down the pathways that aren't being used, to strengthen the ones that are being used, basically the idea of use it or lose it.
So this is where in teaching the idea of automaticity comes into it. So when we're teaching reading, we want it to become automatic that the moment they see a word, they know what it says, or they know then how to spell it, that they can visualise the letter pattern of the word in their brain. It's also where things like times tables come into, or maths facts. We want them to become automatic and they actually form neural pathways to help.
This is what she says. Talking and reading off screen or on screen, but mainly off screen, build strong language skills. So I want that to occur. Active play. Now, I like what you got out here in your yard. I want every church to have what you have there. Active play boosts motor skills and spatial awareness. Social interaction, that's face-to-face social interaction, strengthens emotional intelligence. Music and art spark creativity and critical thinking.
So problem solving.
Yeah, so you can see there that when our kids, yes, tech is part of that, but variety, balance and moderation, both on-screen and off-screen, is needed for positive, healthy brain development.
So I was reading this week that if kids aren't read to for between 10 and 20 minutes a day, by the time they start school, their first year of school, they are down about 1 million words of like being read to. So kids who are read to all the time have heard 1 million more words than children who are not read to. Our kids to do well at school need to have a really broad vocabulary and they need to hear those words regularly. So when you get picture books, have you guys all got picture books at home? Yep. Have a look at the richness of the words in a picture book. You have few words, but each word has lots of meaning attached to it that gives you a really rich and wonderful picture. So that's why we read picture books to our kids, because it gives them words they need to describe how they feel, what they want to do, what's happening around them. You know, it gives them access to emotional literacy. So that's why we actually read to our kids. And if kids aren't read to, then they get to kindergarten and they're way behind their peers because they've never heard those words. And realistically, in the school classroom, we can teach them to read fluently, but we can't catch them up on that store or that bank of words they have.
It's interesting that our 2.5-year-old is in the car this morning.
Not ours, our grandchild.
Travelling to your grandchild, Luca. It's like a child, but we love him. He's on his way to church with Andrew. Andrew works at Foresters Beach Church as a pastor, and he's making out, he's got Michaela's phone, it's not on, but he's making out that he's describing what's happening to Papa, which is myself and Lily and the other grandparents, and he's talking, he's having these conversations, all words coming out, bump, 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 it's bumpy, and I'm going to church, and words coming out like Papa and Lily, and yeah.
And hearing like church, I'm like, ooh, that church's a new one. But basically, he says, I'm on the freeway and I'm in my car seat and I'm not happy about being in the car seat, but I'm really looking forward to going to church.
Yeah.
And then Michaela says to him, do you want to talk to Granddad now? And he goes, bye-bye. And then he starts talking to Granddad. So we think that, you know, there's not a lot going there. The words are in there even if they're not coming out. Yeah. So it's really important that we expose our kids to as many words as we can. Sorry, you can really see I'm a learning and support teacher, can't you?
That's all right, it's good. The brain grows more slowly to 90% of its size by the age of 11. It triples in size from birth to 18 months. Neuron synapses are connected and pathways have been made that become increasingly hardwired. Rowan Gobble, in her book, Raising Kids with Big Baffling Behaviours, I love that title, she talks about neural nets or our constellations. She says, developing at the same time as neural nets, patterns of neurons that fire at the same time. I like to think of it, neural nets as constellations. There are billions of stars and billions of neurons. Some stars are linked together to form constellations. Like stars, some are in more than one constellation, the same with neurons. I love how she describes that. When your child has an experience, their brain lights up in a particular pattern of neurons. If the experience is repeated, think about gaming, enough times those neurons wire together and eventually they create a neural net or a pathway. Then she says, neurons that wire together fire together for better or for worse. So
Daron, that links to what I read. I read scientific articles and, you know, great things, and then I can never remember the author or where I read it. But they've been doing some research about resilience, and they are discovering that kids who are brought up, or children who are brought up experiencing joy and happiness on a regular basis can undergo something that's really stressful and traumatic, but because they have a deep experience of joy, they actually bounce back to that. Yeah. And so if we want our kids to be resilient, we need to expose them to lots of joyful things and play and laughter. And I didn't realise that.
It's creating those constellations.
Those constellations are there. Yeah. And so it's really interesting. You know, my family, we had a fair bit of trauma, lost my mum to breast cancer when I was 16. So we had all that stuff happen. But growing up, we had a deep sense of joy in our family. We did lots of fun things, beach walks, swimming. You know, I was too young for Pathfinders, you know, because I was 10 when Mum got sick. But Dad used to take us everywhere. So we had this deep, deep sense of joy and love and kindness. And so what's happened is after we've been through the trauma, we've actually bounced back to that original state. So, and when our kids are little, we need to work to give our kids that sense of wonder and joy, because it actually sets them in good stead for good mental health as they grow and into adulthood.
I love that description. As a child begins to grow, myelin wraps around the nerves of the brain that create the brake side of the autonomic nervous system and helps the brakes work better and faster. For a child well attached to what you're just saying, for the caregivers, more myelin growth occurs, meaning more regulation and a wider window of stress tolerance.
Yeah, it fits exactly into that.
That puts into the scientific drawing. Teenage years, they reach the teenage years and suddenly our children change. Everything goes out the window. Moods change. For those who've got teenagers, you'll get this. I was told with Madison, strap yourself in. when she turned 11, 12. She'll come back when she's about 18, 19, and sure enough she did, but
She wasn't even that bad.
she had her moods.
I'll tell you the worst 2 years, and it's not years 7 and 8, it's actually grades 5 and 6.
You're probably right. You're right.
Grade 5 and 6.
But what's occurring is a massive synaptic pruning occurring during the teen years for the brain to move from its teen years to its adult brain and become more efficient. So that synaptic pruning is occurring in the preschool years, but again also in those teen years as well.
I actually found it harder to remember new things when that happened.
Yeah.
So, you probably remember growing up, you could just absorb everything. And then as you got older, it was actually harder to remember the new stuff you're exposed to. That's because of the pruning.
The pruning is occurring. And then the myelin white matter grows like a sheath around the axons and neurons. For adolescents, this means that the pruning down of existing neurons and laying down of myelin sheaths connecting the remaining linked neurons begins to occur. Melatonin, the neurotransmitter that regulates the sleep-wake cycle for teens, of all of us actually, but once puberty begins, melatonin release declines. This is why suddenly your child will stop sleeping or develop weird sleep patterns. Add in social media use and gaming and see why we have a parenting storm in the making for our teens.
And some kids do not have a good sleep cycle. So the sleep cycle or phase where you start to get tired, and if you don't go to bed, you wake up and you then have to wait for that period of time till your brain goes back into a sleepy cycle.
Wish I had that.
It's really important that we teach our kids about our sleep cycle and just get them to use to I'm getting tired, go to bed then, because that actually helps you to get better sleep.
That's right.
Yeah, you don't need it. You just go to sleep.
I can go to sleep anywhere. Dopamine, I've talked about that earlier, but basically it's a feel-good chemical. It's a good chemical that makes us want to do things like eat food. Great lunch, by the way. The potatoes were awesome. And drink through to social acceptance. It motivates us to get up and do things. It fires a response also when we're in danger. So dopamine is good. Once we get a reward, serotonin is released, and during teenage years, dopamine levels are at their highest. That's why if they're on screen, and especially with boys are more addicted to gaming, girls more addicted to social media, and they're getting these little hits and the built into you almost win, you have to do it again, you almost win. You're getting these little hits of dopamine right through the game. For girls, it's social media, the likes and this person liked my post, and the comments and community around social media. Girls are more likely to get addicted to social media and the comparison that comes out of that. So hours of scrolling through videos or playing intense online games floods the brain with tiny frequent dopamine hits. Over time, this is make it harder for your teen to focus on slower activities like reading or schoolwork, as we already talked about. Then alongside dopamine, serotonin kicks in and makes us feel calm and relaxed, especially when we feel wanted, important and proud. Serotonin affects mood fluctuations, anxiety and impulse controls. Serotonin also plays a powerful role in our moral judgment, decision making and moral behaviour. Here's the problem. Naturally, there's a temporary decline during our teenage years. That's why they don't get insurance till they turn 25.
And it's also why kids, but particularly boys, do, and I'll be blunt, dumb things. It's because they actually, at that point in time, have problems sorting out what is the right decision and what
and don't have the brakes.
They're also really impulsive.
Yep.
Because the frontal lobe of their brain hasn't started to function correctly. Till that kicks in, you need to give your teenage boys, well, all teenagers, but teenage boys in particular, lots of support around decision making.
Another one I talked about is a neurotransmitter called GABA-aminobutyric acid. There's the inhibitor or braking system in the brain. It's low for teens. In other words, the brakes come off to allow them to develop the adult brain. So this neurotransmitter calms anxiety and impulsivity, regulates the ups and downs. That's why our teens are more prone to developing addictive tendencies than at any other time in their lives. Addictive pathways set during this time are also very hard to break.
It also explains too why we don't want kids starting school really early, because particularly for boys, that gamma aminobutyric acid hasn't kicked in, which means that they don't have the focus they need in year 11 and 12 to be able, some of them do, but a lot of them don't have the ability to focus to get them through their HSC with the marks that they'd like.
Yeah, good point. Then this one is delta phos B, which you can only actually study in people that are dead, but it's a sustained molecular switch for addiction. It's a regulatory protein that affects the plasticity of our brain. Once switched on, it remains for a while and doesn't go away easily. So this is where addiction kicks in. The switch comes on, the plasticity reduces, addictive pathways set in. One big take home from today is for every 1 hour online, 2 hours offline, and preferably outdoors in the green and the blue. If you can do that, it's a win, because those addictive, this delta phos B, the addictive pathways reduce, the brain resets and go all over again. So 1 hour offline, 2 hours offline works really well, and also getting them offline at least 1 hour before bed. That allows the circadian rhythm to set in as well. So again, Joe Orlando says, if your teen spends most of their free time passively consuming online content instead of reading, problem solving or hearing meaningful conversations, it can block their ability to think deeply and creatively. Constant exposure to negative news, which is what social media does and the algorithms do, they found that being online with negative news kept especially girls online for longer if they had negative news content. So the algorithms feed them the negative news rather than the positive news to keep them online for longer. So
that's where, as parents, we need to make sure that, it might be not every night, but once or twice a week, turn the news on and watch it as a family, because you can then deconstruct it, talk about
have
it.
a conversation
what's
around
going on? No, that's not going to affect us. It's just this little group. Or, yeah, that could affect us, but this is what we've done to be safe.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
It's really important that we give kids solutions to problems. Otherwise, they feel anxious and they've got that horrible, horrible sense of impending doom hanging over them. I used to get impending doom. My mother was a really bad driver. She would go to meet Dad on a pathfinder camp somewhere. She'd get lost. She'd drive off the side of the road. Terrible things. I never got that sense of impending doom with my father. And I know that that's a really bad example, but, you need to do things. And eventually my father, I think, got the idea that Mum scared us. So he rearranged things. So
Mum used to get lost.
My mum used to get lost.
Yeah.
Badly. And so, that was that awful sense of impending doom. Kids get that feeling watching the news. And so we need to do things to change it. Dad just organised it so Mum had someone to chauffeur her after
Once
that.
again, variety, balance, moderation, especially for our kids. I'm going to flick through these next few slides fairly quickly because you can see them on the anxiousgeneration.com website if you want to have a look. But after more than a decade of stability and improvement in our kids and their mental health, it suddenly went haywire around the year 2010. And this has happened in every country where mobile phones are in our kids' pockets. Major depression in teens has shot off the scale since 2010. Anxiety has gone off the scale for our kids, especially our girls. Meet up with friends daily has reduced significantly since the year 2010. Teens who get less than 7 hours of sleep a night has decreased significantly. Well, yeah, let's increase, you're right. And you see that after an hour online, depression increases significantly with social media use. This is the one that really hits me. Satisfied with oneself. Was going along pretty well, shot off, dropped significantly since the year 2010. And young people who struggle to find meaning in life shot up. Now, the people who want to criticise Jonathan Haidt and say you're a fearmongerer say this is correlation, not causation. Well, he says, well, if it wasn't it's not the mobile phone, which became freely available in all these countries and given to our teens, you show me what it was. Was it something in the water? Was it something that we put into the food? Maybe there was some of those, but he says that there is no other explanation as to why these things have occurred since the year 2010. He says the phone-based life produces spiritual degradation not just in children, but in all of us. And I love this quote. It says there's a God-shaped hole in every human heart. If it doesn't get filled with something noble and elevated, modern society will quickly pump it full of garbage. So, you might have heard some, what Hate say needs to happen. It says there's 4 cultural norms that need to be in place if we're going to reclaim our children's childhood. Number 1 is no smartphones before high school. In other words, hold off as long as you can on giving your children a smartphone.
So in other words, Daron, we are the parents and we can say no. It's really easy.
It's okay to be the weird parent.
Pardon?
It's okay
I'm
to
very
be
much the weird parent.
We say our kids blame us. We're the weird parents. Tell your friends our parents are weird. They're saying no, and it's okay.
Okay, so basically your kids can have a phone. But
the Nokia is still available. You know, the one with the snake game on it.
Yep. So
and do a text message, it is A, B, C. It takes you half an hour to type it, but the kids can say, I will be late home tonight and get a message to you.
Yeah, so in other words, get them a dumb phone. They can actually text and you can make calls. You can even lock them so that they can only call certain numbers. But if your kid needs a phone in primary school, and I know with public transport sometimes kids do need phones. Our daughter did because she couldn't keep herself safe crossing the road. When I had multiple staff members tell me they'd nearly hit my daughter, she then got a phone, which was a dumb phone, and she could then call me and say, Mum, the bus has dropped me off at the bus stop, and I'd cross the road at my school, pick her up, and then we'd go home. So that's just an example. Smartphones did not happen. Madison was year 8 because she was responsible. Big brother did not get one till he was halfway through year 11.
Yep. And there's rules put in place where if they break those rules, they'll lose their tech for 24 hours. I'll take it, put it in the car, take it to work with me, whatever needed to happen. So there were good rules put in place when they did get those phones. But Jonathan Haidt says this allows the kids to get through most of puberty when the brain's going through all that development before they get exposed to whatever the world wants to throw at them. Number 2, and this is just about to kick in Australia, and he said this before it happened, no social media before the age of 16. Basically, this gives us as parents a fighting chance. Yes, they'll find ways around it.
We were really bad with that one because, you know, kids have access to laptops and our kids did have Facebook way back when it began. And the reason was they had cousins living in England at the time, and that was really the only way they had to communicate freely with their cousins.
But also we had the passwords.
We had passwords. We really watched what they did.
We'd go in and see who they were talking to any time they knew
that.
But
with our kids, the proliferation of social media apps was not around. There's way, way, way more now.
This was back in the MySpace days.
Yeah, this was back in the MySpace days. So I think that our kids were sensible around social media, but these days I would definitely be the parent who would not give them access to it.
Yeah, the rule coming in December, I think it's 15 or something like that, or 4, or somewhere around there, is Australia's now saying that companies have to verify ages and huge fines if they find that they're not doing that. So we're going to see how that goes. That's a big Australian experiment. Number 3, that Australia already does this pretty well, is phone-free schools. In all schools, from elementary through to high school, students should store their phones, smartwatches and any other personal devices that can send or receive texts in phone lockers or locked pouches and during the school day.
And this is also where having a phone that you can only call and text from is really good, because this term, where I work, we obviously have the no phone policy, but our kids have been trusted to keep them in their bags, and it's worked up until the beginning of this term. I'm seeing a real resurgence in kids pulling their phones out again. So if you can avoid the smartphone and get your child a phone that they can call and text from, I'd really try and go that way. If they want a smartphone, maybe you could just have it at home for out-of-school stuff. But if they've got to have a phone that goes to school with them, then definitely get one that's not a smartphone.
Yep, and number 4, far more unsupervised play and childhood independence. And you need to get our kids back out playing in our parks and other places, sports and other activities. This way, children naturally develop social skills, overcome anxiety, and become self-governing young adults. Now, it says all of these ones need to be done collectively. So it says, as parents, you bring around the group of parents at your kids' school and say, hey, we're going to hold off giving the kids a phone until this age, and you make an agreement together so that they can't sort of pit parents against each other and all those sorts of things. And also, it says things like gathering in parks where parents can talk and kids can play. Free play is a powerful way to give kids some of that independent free play and intergenerational free play back.
So what's happening here is, on that last slide that I clicked on from, it's talking about unsupervised play. Growing up, we were actually supervised, but our parents could kind of know where we were, but they let us run around freely.
Within reason,
They weren't there hovering. And so a lot of the time, parents will hover and kids don't get a chance to trip over, fall over. They're not...
Or make up their own rules and break them and remake them again.
Yeah. So, our kids got that type of thing, but I'd sit in the park and watch them, if it was safe and they couldn't get to the roads. So they were doing free play, but I was just off at a distance. And so they've got that illusion. They forget that mum and dad are there.
Yeah. So he says the best thing you do for your children is to give them plenty of playtime with some age diversity and a secure, loving base from which they can set off to play.
Yeah, lots of families, we actually have to do that with great thought these days, because they're saying that kids used to have a dozen, 15, 20 cousins. Nowadays, kids are often only having 2 or 3 or maybe 4 cousins. And our kids between both sides of the family have 26 cousins. That's really rare. But we need to
Brady Bunch.
We don't, or else we don't live near our family. So we have to think about it, right, who's got kids within, a range of our children? What can we do? Okay, let's set up, this is where Pathfinders and Adventurers is good because they get to play with other kids. Okay, maybe we need to set up a meeting in a park once a month on a Sabbath afternoon so that our kids can interact with children similar age out of school.
Yep,
where they
I
learn
like
their
what
social
you
skills.
guys are eating lunch and your kids are out there having a ball playing in a safe area.
Absolutely perfect.
I love it. Every church should come and see what you guys do there. Let your kids be bored. When our kids will come to us and say, I'm bored, we'll say, that's good. Go and enjoy life. We don't need to fill themselves with everything all the time. And it's out of boredom that creativity grows and inventions grow, and it gives the brains of our children room to breathe. So let your kids be bored and wear it as a badge of honour.
So one child who was bored, he taught himself how to edit videos.
He did.
Guess what? Transferable skill into what he's doing now.
He's so glad he did that. Yeah. The conversation now needs to widely include what Haight views as the next major obstacle to kids, which is artificial intelligence, which I haven't even talked about. He says we are at the next tipping point right now. AI is going to take all the pathways of harm from social media and multiply them. And so he said that's the next thing we're going to need to negotiate as parents as well.
With AI, New South Wales Department of Education has got something called EduChat, and obviously I might know a little bit about that. What they've done is they've released or about to release, we're in one of the trial schools, AI for kids. However, it's not giving the kids the answers for their schoolwork. It will give them a rubric or strategies on how to problem solve. So it can say, I need to learn about World War II and how it started. And it will say, well, to learn about World War II, you need to, and it'll give them some prompts that they can then go and research.
Good.
So it's not actually giving them the answer. I don't know about the Adventist school system or private schools, but certainly in the Department of Education, they've decided that they're blocking all the other sources of AI in schools, and they're giving kids a very carefully monitored AI tool that will help them develop critical problem-solving skills.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. So I think we'll take a break now for a little while, because I'm going to flick through, after the break, 12 ways to parent digital age. Then we'll quickly move into our final session of that, which we'll go straight into, which is going to be a fairly quick one on those 7 big blocks to grow faith in your children.